creepiest glitch in the Matrix or unexplainable thing that has ever happened to you. But, as always, before we get started, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below. And if you have your own spooky, scary story, it doesn't even have to be your own story. Just let me know the deets, and or if it's fiction, let me know. But if you have your own, make sure to email this email right here, which is also available in the description down below, as well as my tip jar if you're feeling generous and you're loving the content and you just want to buy a girl a coffee. That's how you can do it. With all that being said, let's get into it. I remember being pretty young, like 9 or 10, and I was in a car park of a pub in England, Southend. I remember seeing someone in their teens in the window of a house looking over the car park. They waved at me and I felt like I knew them somehow. My parents asked me who I was waving at, and I just said the lady in the window over there. Didn't think much of it. Fast forward 10 years later, I was at my nan's new house. I remember walking into her room, which I never was allowed to do. Going to the window, I then realized I was in the house looking over at the same parking lot and remembering that interaction years before. Then a girl around 9 or 10, who was in the car park, waved at me and I waved back. I felt like I knew her. Could not explain it, and have never told anyone about it, and it freaked me out. Holy shit. Ooh, child. I tried to make that as ASMR-esque as I could. That story made me need a sip. Miller Lite, if you're watching, sponsor me. On a side note, do you guys like beer? If so, what is your favorite beer? I'll get it and I'll try it. The next story says, when I was a teenager, my family lived in a big 115-year-old brick house. She's a brick house. Okay, plenty of creepy stuff happened. But one night I was heading to bed when the door between the first floor kitchen and the basement stairs absolutely slammed shut. It had a unique sound that I recognized immediately as the kitchen/basement door. There were no windows open that could have caused a draft. Our dog was asleep on the second floor. I was on the second floor. My parents were both asleep in the third floor attic, which had been converted to the master bedroom. Goals. None of us could have shut the door. Fucking terrified, I worked up the courage to go investigate. I would have had to grab a weapon. Carrying my hilariously teeny pocket knife, for protection. As I went downstairs, I turned on every light. When I reached the kitchen, the door was wide open. Even more freaked out, I ran back up to bed, leaving the lights on. A minute or two later, I heard a definite shh, okay, from downstairs. I laid in bed and I was ready to accept my demise. Eventually, I somehow fell asleep, and in the morning, I was there first, downstairs. I woke up before my parents and dog, and found that the lights were all off and the basement door had been shut again. Honestly, this doesn't sound like a glitch in the Matrix story. This sounds like you got robbed. But they commented and said every single door and window was locked when I went to investigate, and were still locked in the morning, so. But it's also possible that somebody woke up and noticed all this shit and turned off the lights and locked everything back. This is freaky though, nonetheless. The next story says, about a year ago, me and my cousin visited Los Angeles. We were driving around using Google Maps, and after about our third or fourth exit, we swear we both heard it sigh loudly before it rerouted us. We freaked out and made sure our driving was on point the rest of the ride. The rest of the trip there, if we missed any of our exits or turn, we always apologized to Google, so hopefully she would know we were just morons and not assholes. The next person says, I removed a painting from the wall during a late evening cleaning, put it away and returned to the wall to see a never before seen painting on the same spot, put chills down my spine. The next person says, I used to have a reoccurring dream as a teenager every night for months. I was sitting at a table on a patio of a restaurant. I was out there alone waiting for my food. A homeless man comes up to the other side of the patio and asks for change. I'm digging in my wallet for a couple of dollars, and then I hear tires screech and look up to see a crash in an intersection near the restaurant. I run out there to see if I can help, and as I run into the road, I get hit by a car and wake up at the impact. After a while, the dream had stopped, and I put it out of my mind. Fast forward to me being 28 and sitting at on the border, on the patio, waiting for my food. Homeless guy comes walking past the restaurant, but doesn't stop and ask for change. It makes me think about my dream, though, and I start feeling uneasy. Shortly after, I hear the tires screech, and I see a wreck happen in the intersection near the restaurant. I begin to run out, but stop at the sidewalk and look towards the incoming traffic, and there's an SUV not slowing down. She was on her phone and blew through the intersection completely unaware of what just happened. Ran out and checked on the people. Everything was fine. It's giving Final Destination moment. The next says this happened around 1991. It's the middle of the night. I'm standing in my sister's room, and it must be a full moon, because even though it's around 1 a.m. and all the lights are off, I can clearly see. There's a mixing bowl with popcorn kernels in the bottom on the floor in front of the TV, and some rental VHS in a pile nearby. I hear a noise and turn around to see my sister normally. Very friendly Labrador retriever looking like Cujo. Fangs bared, snarling, hackles raised. Suddenly there's a bright flash of light, and I wake up like I hit the bed from a great height. I think that was a weird dream. Eventually, I fall back asleep in the morning, and I call my sister planning to tell her the story, but she preempts me by telling me about a weird thing that happened in the night. They woke up to the sound of the dog snarling about 1 a.m. Her husband thought there was a prowler in the house, got a gun, and went to find the dog. She was standing in the living room snarling at the middle of the room. He couldn't see anyone, so he flipped on the light. No one was there, and the dog instantly stopped snarling and walked to her bed like nothing had happened. He checked the property and went back to bed. He talked a bit, and I found out they watched some rental movies, and of course we had popcorn. Why? My sister is a little woohoo at times, so I decided not to tell her about my night. She lived about 450 miles away, by the way. The next story says, I wouldn't say this is creepy, but it's definitely one of the most quaintly surreal things I've ever experienced. In 2016, I was injured at work, and for about 6 months of my life, it consisted of going to physical therapy and being confined to a bed until I could walk again. With that in mind, I had a lot of time to read books. One of the books that I was reading was Ex-Heroes by Peter Clines. Now, I don't know about anyone else, but when I read a book, I like to cast characters in my head, coming up with how they look. That's me. I like to do that, and sometimes I'll cast like actual actors in my head, and it's a whole movie, and we have a good time. One of the minor characters in this book was named Ilya, and because I know someone named Ilya, and because the book is set in LA, where I live, the Ilya in the book became the Ilya I knew in my imagination. But then something strange started to happen. The Ilya in the book made specific references to the movie, or to movies like Aliens, a movie which the Ilya I know is a huge fan of. The Ilya in the book was a big fan of firearms, as the Ilya I know is. Put into words, these details seem slim, but there was something so strange about the character in this book that I eventually reached out to Ilya that I knew to ask her about it. Turns out that the Ilya I knew knows the author Peter Clines, who had put him in the book. What are the odds that I would choose to buy a random book with a story that takes place essentially on the street in on my street in Los Angeles, and features somebody that I know in real life as a minor character? That blew my mind, and it's easily one of the most surreal experiences I've had. This one was super cool, super cool. I've told this story before. 3 years ago, my childhood dog died very suddenly and unexpectedly. She was sick for a few days, but turned it around and got better before dying very quickly and painfully in my dad's arms. I live out of state, so I wasn't able to be there for any of it. It's a 6-hour drive, and I felt very guilty about her passing without me there. I had a very deep connection to her, and she had been my very best friend for 12 years. I was devastated by her death. I couldn't work or eat or do much of anything. I was constantly bursting into tears. It was just awful. My heart ached, and I found myself apologizing to her for not being there. I felt so guilty. One night, I had a dream about her. I dreamt I was in this empty space, and Charlie came running up to me, whimpering excitedly. She was licking my face, and generally just freaking out, and I was just sobbing. I knew she was dead, and I knew she was visiting me in my dream. I was very aware of it all. I just kept hugging her and crying and apologizing, and she just kept licking my face and being affectionate. I woke up with tears streaming down my face and sat up in bed. I could smell her distinctive smell, and on my sleeve I pulled off one of her hairs. She had never been to my apartment, and I hadn't seen her recently, but it wasn't one of my cat's hairs, as Charlie was a collie mix, and their fur pattern is very distinctive. It might be a coincidence, but it was so vivid and real. I like to think she was visiting me to let me know everything is okay, and not to worry. I haven't had a dream like that since. Not my story, but my grandpa's. So he served in the Navy and had to come home in 5 years. He finally got home, and on his way, he saw this old friend. Let's call him Wally. Wally was getting on his normal bus, and my grandpa shouted, "Hi," to him, but Wally didn't respond. But he didn't think much of it, seeing how Wally didn't have the best hearing. Wally got on his bus and looked my grandpa in the eye as the bus drove away. Later, after he got home and was talking to his dad, he asked him how Wally was doing and told his dad about how he saw him earlier. His dad was silent for a minute and asked him if he was sure he saw Wally. My grandpa said yes, and his dad replied, "Wally died 6 months ago." Holy shit. One day, when I was about 8, I didn't go to school because I was sick. My friend was supposed to bring me homework, etc., but he never came. My grandpa came home from work and he told me that was dead. I was devastated. That night I had a dream. I was with my friend at a playground next to our school, and we were talking. Then he told me that he is safe and it didn't hurt when that car hit him. The next day, my mother wanted to talk to me about the situation, and she asked me if I wanted to know what happened. I told her I know everything because my friend had told me. She thought that my grandpa had told me, but he did not. He said that he did not want to tell me without her knowing it. That night, I had a dream again, and I was talking to him again. We were playing and having fun, and he told me that he really had to go, and we won't see each other ever again. The next day was his funeral, and I really haven't had a dream about him ever since. I have goosebumps. Oh my goodness, and am I about to cry? This might get buried, but oh well. When I played baseball as a kid, they were handing out trophies at the end of the season. They called out the names of the kids while we received our trophies. There happened to be a kid with the same name as me. We met after the ceremony because it was weird since our last name isn't very common. We had the same birthday and everything. We looked alike. Both our dads were named Derek, and both our sisters were named Lily. As a kid, I found it cool. As an adult, I find it cool and also disturbing. Somebody commented there's a podcast called Radio Lab. Radio Lab. Radio Lab. They did an episode on coincidence that has a similar story about a girl in England that releases a balloon with her name and address on it. It floats some 100 miles and lands in a guy's yard whose neighbor is the same age with the same name and had a bunch of similarities. I may have to find this podcast. I'm a dude, bro. This summer, I bought my girlfriend a last-minute birthday trip to go kayaking around San Juan Islands off the Washington state coast. That would make me marry a man, for real. After a long drive and ferry trip, we found the tour group of about 20 people, and were then shuffled into a shuttle van for a ride to the beach. Now, my girlfriend has a unique name similar to the name of a famous painter. Let's say it's Rebecca Warhol, just for fun. It's not. She's a little ray of sunshine, and started chatting with a middle-aged woman sitting next to her on the shuttle as we waited to leave. The woman noted that she had always loved the name Rebecca, as it was her mother's name. They made pleasant small talk in the van until the tour guide passed around the sign-in sheet for all of us to fill out. That's when things got strange. My girlfriend wrote her full name on the sheet and passed it to the woman, who immediately shouted, "Oh my God," and started crying. After a few minutes of total confusion, she told us Rebecca Warhol was my mother's full name, and these islands were her favorite place in the world. She passed away this summer from cancer, and we've traveled hundreds of miles to spread her ashes here. We were stunned. I literally picked a random date, time, and tour company, and then we were split into the same group as this woman, and my girlfriend was sitting right next to her on the shuttle. What the hell? She continued by saying, "My daughter told us that Nana Rebecca would be with us on this trip, and I didn't believe it until now. It was the most unbelievable coincidence we had ever experienced, and has totally convinced me that there is more to this world than we think." As my brother later said, the universe winked at us that day. I just tried to wink at you guys, and good night. This story was Several years ago, I went home and turned on my PC, browsed the web for a bit, literally watched a video about the Matrix, then looked out my window. Then I suddenly snapped awake sitting in my chair. I looked at my monitor to see that it had turned off. I thought, strange, I must have fallen asleep, and proceeded to move the mouse to wake up my PC from sleep mode. It did not wake up. I was confused until I noticed that the power strip was not even plugged in. It had been turned on. It had never been turned on in the first place. That one weirded me out for quite a while. I must have gone home, fell asleep, and dreamt the whole thing. Or at least, I hope so. The next story says, I shared this a few years ago when this question was asked last time. I didn't realize how glitchy in the Matrix it was until people started commenting. In college, I took a hard news/soft news journalism class. They're like me for real. Okay, anyway. Where one of the assignments was to write an obituary with one of my grandparents. Okay. The professor told us to write it on a deceased grandparent. But if all your grandparents were still alive, we had to choose one. I don't like that. I don't like that. In my case, all of my grandparents were alive. I procrastinated doing the assignment until the night before it was due because it seemed like a morbid assignment, especially since all my grandparents were still alive. Scrambling for an easy grandparent to write about, I gave my mom a call and asked her for some basic bio information about my maternal grandfather. As we were talking about my grandpa's career, my mom couldn't recall the name of one of the companies he worked at. She lectured me about waiting until the last minute to work on the assignment because it was late, 10:30 p.m. my grandpa's time. However, she said she would give him a call to see if he was still awake and able to answer that question once my assignment was due the following morning. When my mom called my grandpa, my grandma answered the phone in a panic. My grandma frantically explained that the paramedics had just arrived and were performing CPR on my grandpa because he had stopped breathing and lost consciousness. My mom was able to stay on the phone with my grandma until they took my grandpa to the hospital where he was declared dead. In the time my mom had been talking on the phone about my grandpa's obituary, he was dying. His death was entirely unexpected at that, although he was in his 80s. He was the healthiest of the grandparents at that time. We ended up using the obituary I wrote for that assignment as his actual obituary. Still freaks me out when I talk about the timing. Somebody commented and said, reminds me a bit of this time when I was a kid. I had this little joke novelty thing I had gotten at a magic shop while on vacation. This was actually so long ago I forgot exactly what the thing was supposed to resemble. But it was something you were supposed to open. And it had this plastic thing inside suspended on the rubber band, or on a rubber band. You were supposed to wind the thing up and close it. You hand it to your victim, sucker, friend. They crossed out victim and sucker, by the way. And they open it, which releases tension, allowing the plastic thing to spin around, rattling loudly against the plastic case and vibrating in their hand, scaring the shit out of them. Anyway, I got all my relatives with this thing because I was a funny little 10-year-old shit. My great aunt and uncle were up visiting and staying at my grandparents' house. I had the thought to try this trick on my great aunt, but something stopped me. It didn't feel right, and I very clearly had the thought, I don't want to give her a heart attack. No idea why. She was a bit older, but so were my grandparents, who I already tricked. Well, very confused. Holy shit, my great aunt passed away with a heart attack. Seemed like a spooky coincidence. So that's always stuck with me. The next and last story says, once when we were kids, I had some friends with an Ouija board at the basement of the building where I lived. Through the stairs, there was an elevator shaft that had these wide bars where you could stick your arm in them. Typically old elevator design, or a typical old elevator design. So one night, they decided to go to the basement to do another Ouija board session, and I decided to drop a cup of glass through the shaft just to scare them off. I let go of the cup, saw it vanish in the darkness, and I never heard the cup hit the ground. I stood there confused. Next day, I went downstairs to the basement with one of my friends, and the cup was there, placed in the middle of the elevator shaft floor. The cup was upright and intact. I was seriously freaked out by that because it would be impossible to someone enter the elevator shaft and place the cup like that. The cup should have been broken into pieces since I threw it from the 10th floor against a cement floor. And that, ladies and gentlemen, concludes our spooky, scary, unsettling session. By the way, I don't think I let anybody know, but I think I'm going to change the upload schedule. I think it's now going to be Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. I had to think about that for a second, but Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday, Sunday, Wednesday, Friday. That is the new schedule. So, yeah. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment down below. And if you have your own stories, it doesn't have to be your own. Just let a girl know. Send it to this email right here, which is also available in the description, as well as my tip jar if you want to buy a girl coffee, because, you know, the content's so great. Anything is greatly appreciated. I love y'all. Stay safe, stay spooky, and have good bomb-ass sleep. Namaste. Have a nice day.